Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories. Escape from Wake Island. I remember the hot, oppressive air of Wake Island like it was yesterday, even though those days feel like a lifetime ago. The island, surrounded by nothing but endless blue ocean, was both our prison and the place where we fought for our lives. For months, I had watched the Japanese soldiers tighten their grip on the island, their presence suffocating and relentless. It was December of 1941, and I was a Marine, just another soldier on a small, insignificant piece of land in the Pacific, but it felt like the entire world was watching us. When the attack came, it was swift. The explosions, the screams, the panic, it all happened in a matter of moments, but it was enough to change everything. The island, the last remaining outpost of American control in that part of the Pacific, fell. They captured us all, stripped us of our weapons, our pride, and our hope. We were just numbers to them, nothing more. They shoved us into overcrowded barracks, kept us under constant watch. We weren't allowed to speak freely, to move without permission, or even to dream. We were beaten, starved, and left to wither away. But there was always something in the back of my mind. A thought, a hope, something that refused to let me give up entirely. I wasn't the only one. There were others, men like me who had fought the same way, who had taken an oath to protect their country, to never surrender. But now we were captives, forced to look at the stars we once swore to defend, and wonder if we would ever get the chance to fight again. Then it happened. A plan began to form. I don't remember exactly how it started. Maybe it was the madness in our eyes, the desperation that had grown too strong to ignore. But one evening, as we sat in the dusty dirt beneath the stars, trying to forget our situation, one of the men, a quiet fellow named Ray, spoke up. "We can make it. I know we can. If we get out of here, if we get to a boat, we'll be free. It's just a matter of surviving the first stretch." It was crazy, insane. Our chances were so slim, it felt like a death sentence. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. We couldn't stay here and die slowly. No, we needed to do something. Ray's idea was simple, but deadly. We would escape. We'd steal a raft or build one, anything that would float, and we'd make a run for it. We had no maps, no clear understanding of where we were going, but we knew one thing for certain: we had to make it to an American position. We had to get back to the fight. The plan took shape over the course of several weeks, with whispered conversations in the dead of night, using every ounce of strength we had left. We knew the risks. The Japanese soldiers patrolled the island constantly, watching, waiting for any sign of escape. If they found us before we left, we would be executed on the spot. But we had no choice. It wasn't just the fear of death that kept us going, though. It was the sheer determination to survive, the hope that, against all odds, we could make it out of this hell. And so we prepared. We scavenged for materials, anything we could use to create something seaworthy. Broken wood, rubber from the tires of abandoned vehicles, canvas from old tents. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We spent hours, days, in secret, piecing together a raft that would carry us into the unknown. It wasn't pretty, but it would have to do. I still remember the night we finally decided to go for it. The sky was clear, the moon was full, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something deep inside me, a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. We sneaked out of the barracks one by one, each of us moving as quietly as we could, careful not to make a sound. We gathered at the edge of the island, where our makeshift raft awaited us. It was a ragged thing, barely held together, but it was our only chance. I looked at the faces of the men around me, Ray, Mike, Billy, and a few others. They looked just as I felt. Nervous, scared, but ready to fight for a future that seemed impossible. We didn't speak much as we climbed aboard, our hearts pounding in our chests, the sound of the ocean lapping at the shore the only noise in the still night. As we pushed off from the island, the full weight of what we were doing hit me. There was no going back. We were leaving behind everything, our comrades, our families, everything we had known. But there was something about the ocean, the vastness of it, that made me feel small and insignificant, like a tiny speck lost in a world of uncertainty. The raft creaked beneath us as we drifted further into the darkness, the island slowly disappearing behind us. There was no turning back now. It was us against the world. We didn't know what lay ahead. We didn't know if we'd survive the journey or if we'd be found and executed before we even made it out of sight. But we had made our choice, and there was no turning back. I don't know what I expected when we set out. Maybe I thought the ocean would be different somehow, calmer, more forgiving. But it wasn't. The waves crashed against us, the wind howled through the night, and the raft tossed and turned like a leaf in the storm. It felt like the ocean was trying to swallow us whole, to take us back to where we came from, to pull us under and drown us in the weight of our own desperation. The first night was the hardest. We were all exhausted, both physically and mentally. Our bodies ached from the constant paddling. Our stomachs growled in hunger. There was no food, no water, just the promise of survival that kept us going. But as the hours passed, something else started to take hold. The fear, the doubt, the realization that we were completely alone in this vast, unforgiving sea. We had no compass, no map, no way of knowing where we were headed. The ocean stretched out before us, endless and empty. All we had was each other, and that was both a comfort and a burden. As the night wore on, I could feel the weight of our choices pressing down on me. What had we really signed up for? Could we make it? Or had we sealed our own fates with this desperate attempt to escape? The answers didn't come, but the journey had only just begun. The second day at sea was a blur of exhaustion and desperation. The sun, which had risen over the horizon like a blazing inferno, beat down on us relentlessly, and the sea, once so vast and mysterious, now felt like a prison. The waves slapped against the sides of our raft, as though mocking us, reminding us just how insignificant we were in the grand scheme of things. Our bodies were already beginning to show the strain. Blisters had formed on our hands from the constant paddling, and the lack of food and water was starting to take its toll. I could feel the weight of hunger gnawing at me, a constant, unbearable ache deep in my gut. My throat was dry, parched, and the salt from the sea breeze had begun to irritate my skin, making everything worse. But it wasn't the physical pain that bothered me the most. No, it was the silence. The kind of silence that comes from being out in the middle of nowhere, with no one around for miles, nothing but the constant roar of the ocean in your ears. We had no idea where we were going, no way to know if anyone would even find us. We didn't have any maps, no supplies, not even enough food for a day, let alone the weeks it would take to reach an American-held position. But we had each other. That's what we told ourselves. That's what we clung to. I remember Mike's face as he stared out into the distance, his eyes glazed with both hope and dread. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was, that we were already in too deep. Every time a wave rocked the raft, it felt like we might tip over, and it would all be over in an instant. The thought of sinking, of drowning out here in the middle of the Pacific with no one to help, sent a chill through me. But it was that fear, that primal terror, that kept us paddling. As long as we kept moving forward, we still had a chance. Ray, who had first come up with the idea of escape, didn't seem fazed by any of it. He had the kind of resilience that made you believe in miracles. It wasn't that he was immune to fear, it was just that he didn't let it control him. Every time someone started to falter, Ray would be the one to lift them up, to remind them why we were doing this. "We're not dead yet," he'd say, and somehow it always gave us a little push to keep going. The first night in the open sea was cold. It was a bone-deep chill that no blanket could cure. We huddled together on a raft, our bodies packed tightly to conserve what little warmth we had. The stars above us were beautiful, though they held no comfort. I couldn't help but think of the thousands of men who had fallen in this very ocean, who had never made it out of the hell that was the Pacific. How many men had tried to escape? How many had died, just like we were about to? The thought haunted me. As the days dragged on, the situation only grew more dire. The hunger began to gnaw at us like a living thing. We hadn't had a proper meal in days, and there was no sign of land, no sign of help. All we had were the ocean and the raft, which creaked and groaned under our weight. The food we had gathered in secret before we left had long run out. A few cans of stale beans, some dried fish, and a little water. None of it was enough. Every drop of water felt like a lifeline, every bite of food a miracle. But the hardest part wasn't the hunger or the thirst. It was the constant waiting. The endless stretch of ocean with no end in sight. The solitude. We had no choice but to keep moving forward, to keep paddling, even though we had no idea where we were going. I remember one morning, around the fourth day, when the weather started to turn. The sky, which had been clear for days, began to cloud over, and the wind picked up. A storm was coming, and there was nothing we could do about it. We tied ourselves to the raft, trying to hold on as the waves grew higher, the wind howling in our ears. It was the kind of storm that would break a man. But we held on. The storm lasted for hours, but it felt like days. We were tossed around like rag dolls, our bodies bruised and battered by the waves. I thought we were going to sink. I thought we were going to drown, right there in the heart of the Pacific, with no one around to even know we were gone. But we survived. Somehow we made it through. When the storm finally passed, the ocean was eerily calm. The waves had subsided, the wind had died down, and the air was thick with humidity. I remember feeling a strange sense of relief until I saw Ray, who was staring out at the horizon with a look of absolute horror on his face. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. At first, we didn't understand. What could possibly be wrong? The storm had passed, the weather was calm again. But then we saw it, and my heart sank. In the distance, far off on the horizon, was a ship. It wasn't a military ship. It was too small, too dark, too unmarked. It wasn't American. It was Japanese. For a moment, I thought I was seeing things. But no, there it was. A Japanese patrol boat, cruising through the waters, its silhouette unmistakable in the morning light. My stomach dropped. This was it. If they saw us, if they came for us, our escape was over. We would be caught, tortured, and killed. All of it, the raft, the hunger, the pain, the suffering, it would have been for nothing. We had no choice. We had to hide. Ray was the first to act. We can't let them see us. Paddle faster. We have to get out of sight. We all worked as quickly as we could, paddling harder, trying to maneuver the raft away from the boat. But the currents were against us, and the patrol boat was closer now. Too close. We weren't going to outrun them. "God help us," Mike muttered, and I felt the same desperation burning in my chest. But then, as if by some miracle, the boat changed course. It veered off to the left, disappearing into the distance. The tension in my body dissolved, leaving behind nothing but the lingering taste of fear. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. But we had survived for now. We didn't speak much after that. We just kept paddling, kept going forward, even though we had no idea where we were going. Our bodies were broken, but our spirits were still alive. The days dragged on. The sun burned down on us, relentless and unforgiving. There were moments when I thought I might lose my mind, moments when the waves seemed to mock us, as if the ocean itself had turned against us. But we kept going. There was nothing else to do. We couldn't stop. To stop meant death. By the time we had crossed what felt like an endless stretch of ocean, our bodies were no longer our own. We were skeletons, our skins stretched tight over our bones, our faces hollow from hunger and thirst. Each morning, I woke to the same burning thirst in my throat, the same gnawing ache in my stomach. There were days I couldn't tell if it was the sun or if the hunger that hurt more. We had no water left, and the food had long since run out. The only thing we had now was the hope that somewhere out there salvation was waiting for us. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to feel more and more distant. We had nothing left but the raft and each other. The sea, which had once seemed like an endless expanse of possibility, now felt like a trap. The ocean was vast, empty, and silent, as if it were trying to swallow us whole. I couldn't remember when I last heard another human voice, or when I last saw land on the horizon. It had been days, weeks, maybe, since we had seen any sign of civilization. The only thing that kept me going was the thought that we couldn't give up. We had come so far. We had made it this far. We couldn't let it end now. Ray was still the one who kept us moving. He was the one who kept our spirits up, who made sure we didn't lose hope. His voice, even in the worst of times, was steady and strong. He didn't show fear, or at least he didn't let us see it. Every time the ocean seemed ready to swallow us whole, Ray would remind us of why we had started this journey in the first place. He'd tell us about the families we left behind, about the country we swore to defend, and he'd say, "We're not done yet." Not by a long shot. It was those words that kept us going. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ocean in a fiery orange glow, something happened. It was subtle at first, like a faint whisper on the wind. A change in air. something different. I remember Ray looking out at the horizon, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, I thought he was just imagining things, but then I saw it too. A shape, a shadow on the water, and then a glint of metal. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir deep inside me. It was hope. Is it? Mike asked, his voice barely audible. Ray didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the shape in the distance, his brow furrowed in concentration. And then, without another word, he started paddling. Slowly at first, but then faster, harder, as if the sight of that shape had given him new life. I followed his lead, paddling as hard as I could, my muscles screaming in protest. The others followed suit, and soon we were all moving toward it, our eyes fixed on that distant shape, which was growing larger with every stroke. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I thought we might actually make it. The closer we got, the clearer it became. It was a ship, an American ship. The sight of it was almost too much to bear. My mind was struggling to process the reality of it. Could it really be? Had we finally made it? Or was this just another cruel mirage, another illusion brought on by hunger and thirst? But no, this was real. This was the chance we had been praying for. As we neared the ship, I could see the men on board, their faces barely visible against the bright light of the setting sun. They had seen us. They were watching us. My heart leaped in my chest. But then, just as I thought we were going to be pulled up alongside the ship, the unthinkable happened. A gunshot rang out. The sound of it echoed in the stillness of the ocean, a sharp, piercing crack that cut through the air like a knife. My body froze. My heart skipped a beat. Had they mistaken us for Japanese soldiers? Had they been sent to stop us? No, it couldn't be. We were so close. We were so damn close. Then another gunshot. I looked around at the faces of the men beside me. Ray, Mike, Billy. They looked just as confused and terrified as I felt. We were so close. We were so damn close to freedom. And now this. Ray's voice cut through the panic. Don't stop. Keep paddling. They'll see we're American. We didn't question him. We couldn't. We just paddled harder, the wind whipping around us, the waves crashing against the raft as we pushed forward with everything we had left. I could see the ship now, so close that I could almost taste it. The men on board were still watching us, but they hadn't fired again. And then, just as I thought we were going to reach them, the ship began to move away. My heart sank. No, not now. Not after everything we'd been through. But then the voice of one of the sailors shouted down at us. Hold on. We're coming for you. The ship slowed, and a small motorboat was lowered into the water. The engine roared to life, cutting through the waves, and in a matter of minutes, they reached us. As the boat pulled up alongside our raft, I could barely contain the tears that threatened to spill. I felt like I was dreaming. This couldn't be real. But it was. The men on the motorboat reached out to pull us in, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the solid grip of human hands around me, lifting me out of the raft and onto the boat. I looked around at the faces of my comrades, Ray, Mike, Billy, and I saw the same thing in their eyes. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude, and the faintest spark of disbelief. We had made it. As we were pulled away from the raft and carried toward the American ship, I looked back one last time at the raft. It had carried us so far, through hell and back. But now it was gone, and so were we. The ship that had rescued us was a lifeline, pulling us from the jaws of death and giving us a second chance. It felt like a miracle. We had made it out of the hell that was Wake Island, out of the ocean that had almost claimed us. But even as I sat there, finally safe, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had left something behind, something that would never truly be gone. The escape was over. But the memories would never fade.